Hi, and welcome to another On the Books with your host, Norm Buffnet Constantine. This is the seventh in our series of interviews and discussions with writers from in and around Bowie. Today, we have Stafford Battle with us, a science fiction writer. Welcome.
Oh, it's good to be here.
I'm so glad you could come. And just as full disclosure, Stafford is a member of the Mitchellville Writers Club or group, which I am also a member of. And a lot of those folks are coming here because they're some of the best writers in Bowie. So, why sci-fi?
I love science fiction. I think it tells the stories that we need to hear. I think it inspires us. And I believe that we need to think outside of the box. And sometimes with science fiction, you can do things that you normally can't do with regular fiction. That's why I like it.
Okay. When did the writing bug bite you?
Oh, Norm, it first bit me back in the 7th grade. I wrote a short story about a talking tree. And the teachers loved it. As a matter of fact, I won a small prize, which was an airplane trip around the city. And since then, I've always tried to find time to put down notes, write poetry, and just express my feelings through the written word.
So, as a 7th grader, were you a big reader?
Yes, I enjoyed reading whenever I could. As a matter of fact, I stumbled into Edgar Rice Burroughs and his John Carter of Mars and Tarzan. And at that time, I didn't know all the other ramifications of the writer, but the stories are fun.
What about some of the other genre stories? Sherlock Holmes?
I loved Sherlock Holmes. I read Jules Verne.
A science fiction writer.
Right, but he was writing in the classics. He was writing in the 1800s. And the stories he wrote about before we even had submarines or rockets, he was writing about these things.
What about H.G. Wells?
I loved H.G. Wells. And again, I have to tell people every time I meet them, forget about the movies. Read the book.
Why is a book better, in your view, than a movie?
The book actually takes the time to really get you involved with the characters. I know in modern writing, they say, well, you got to jump in the middle and start writing right away. But if you read some of the great writers, Sherlock Holmes, Jules Verne, all of those guys, you actually knew these people. You knew the characters. The author would take the time to explore every subtle nuance. And I enjoyed that.
Okay, and so our 7th grade budding writer goes off to high school.
Yes, Norm, I was fortunate. I went to high school in Washington, D.C., started there, and then I got a scholarship to a high school in Milton, Massachusetts, Milton Academy. As a matter of fact, Governor Deval Patrick was there when I was there.
Oh,
he was
okay.
an underclassman. And at the time...
he wasn't governor.
No, he wasn't governor then. No,
yeah.
he was like me, one of the local nerds. So,
Okay.
But he was a quiet guy, but he was very serious. But I met other students who turned me on to other books, and we just like to read.
And did you have a writing club or anything?
No, nothing as elaborate as fancy as that. We just most of us found a quiet place in the library. Back then we had libraries that actually had books, and you could spend an afternoon and go through the shelves and read things. And that's where I fell in love with some of the classics,
Such as?
Well, obviously 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea is a good one. And also Frankenstein, the original Frankenstein.
Mary Shelley.
Yes. When she wrote that, she had to write it as a man because the publishers wouldn't publish the woman back then. But as you know, Frankenstein is one of the most repeated sci-fi horror stories throughout our literature. And in 2016 will be the 200th year since she wrote it. And it's still a strong story. Dracula was another strong story that you should read because it was told not as a narrative, but as a series of letters coming from different characters, which I thought was very unique.
Have you ever tried that technique in any of your own fiction?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
But I'm open to suggestion.
Okay. I understand that you have developed a science fiction website.
Yes, I have. Yes, I have.
And what kind of things would I find on your website? And by the way, you can get the address in the credits at the end of the show. So what kind of things would I find on Stafford Battle's website?
You'd find stories about the history of science fiction, and I have an African flavor through some of my science fiction. Also, I've been writing about Japanese science fiction, which people call anime, but it's actually science fiction. They're giant robots and they're monsters.
Well, anime is a really interesting genre
Yes.
of its own, and it has some things we can't talk about here on this show.
Well, it depends now. There's different types of anime.
Right, I know.
You have to be
Different types of science fiction,
Yes.
too. But what would you say is the kind of science fiction you write?
I write science fiction that takes a different look at the way our world is and how we can influence or perhaps change our world. For instance, I will never write a science fiction about a captain on the bridge of a starship. That's been done. I will never write a science fiction about zombies. Zombies are dead. There's no real plot change. I'm not going to write about the romantic vampire. If you want to read about the real Dracula, read the original stories.
Bram Stoker.
Yes, yes.
Great story.
Great stories. What I write about, what happens in this world if we discover a way to bring someone back from the dead in all their glory and all their memories intact and give them special abilities. What happens also if we take these new technologies, such as robotics, and give a robot the ability not only to think, but to influence our daily lives?
So you speculate about things.
That's right. That's why they call it speculative fiction.
Well, I actually have a different view about why they call it speculative fiction. It may be genre writers trying to be something else.
Well, that's true. But you know, Alice in Wonderland is speculative fiction because it's imagining what would happen if you
Went through the Looking Glass,
or
but
ate too
that
many
became
mushrooms.
another novel all of its own.
Yeah.
Is cyberpunk part of science fiction? Because I'm partial to cyberpunk.
I would love cyberpunk. Yes, and cyberpunk talks about what happens when our digital world collides with the real world. We're talking about when people can use the ability to enter these fantastic illusionary worlds, only created by a computer, as well as what doors have we opened when we get into these new technologies?
I loved Neuromancer.
Yes.
William Gibson is William Gibson. The opening chapter of Neuromancer, when he talks about the gray skyline that looks like a TV, just brilliant. The chapter about the bar. I've decided if I ever open a bar, one of the names that will be very possible is The Chat. The Chat was a great place. But we're not here to talk about William Gibson. We're here to talk about Stafford Battle. What's your process? How do you do this?
I start with a problem or an idea. Sometimes I wake up in the morning and I says, you know, what happens if all of these great things we're working towards, like genetically modified foods, what if the scientists are wrong? You know, what could happen to us? What would happen to us, what will happen to us when we run out of oil, when there's no more carbon or coal to burn? How will we survive
Maybe
know,
we won't.
well, maybe we won't because, as you know, in some science fictions, humans don't survive. But my writing process is, I want to tell a story. I want to warn people or give them some suggestions.
Are you a preacher?
All writers are preachers. We just don't stand in a pulpit. We write and put it out there. Yes, I'm a preacher.
Oh, well.
Every writer is a preacher.
So science fiction writers are preachers.
You got to be careful, Norm, because you're about to say something about, is the church science fiction?
So that's an interesting thought.
And you could get in trouble.
Yes, I can. And so we better drive down another road. Actually, I'll drive down any road you want.
There you go.
But it's the church science fiction. I'm going to have to speculate about that. Now, I know when I first met you in the writers group, you had some things in production.
Yes.
One was, and it's actually a subject I like to talk about, was a Zulu chief.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
That's for my novel, my recent novel, Resurrecting the King. Yes.
Okay.
And what I did in this, I took a problem. And the problem was that my main character has given up on the world. And he feels like there's nothing left for him to live for. And then he gets inspired to say, we can fix this if we bring back a great hero from the past to lead us, to give us inspiration. So we're going to resurrect somebody powerful. And he decides eventually, well, let's resurrect one of the most brutal tyrants on the planet, Shaka Zulu, who during the 18th century or 17th century, he terrorized Southern Africa, one of the few African nations to beat the British at that time, conquering the entire planet, and almost changed the course of the planet.
I understand the great Zulu victory
Yeah.
over the British Army, but not to be a homie. Although it wasn't indigenous people, but the British were defeated a couple of times in the colonies.
Right, different colonies. But in Africa, they tended to win quite a bit.
Yeah, they tended to win here quite a bit,
Well,
too.
you know, and if you look at the map, there are very few countries on the planet that the British haven't influenced. Britannica ruled the waves, literally.
I say oppressed, but
Well,
that's another issue.
But back to the story, I'm using the fact that, and I thought about the 200th anniversary of the Frankenstein story. And that's 200 years since Shelley wrote that, and it's still a strong story. I said, I can take that story a step further. We're going to choose who I bring back, not a killer. Well, he was a killer. Not a maniac. Well, he was a maniac, but not somebody who was hung as a criminal. He wasn't hung as a criminal, but he did get assassinated. But anyway, bring back someone who could possibly lead the world. And if you look at modern politics, that's what a lot of people want. They want to find a leader, no matter how despotic he is, to lead them.
So,
And that's
in
my warning.
Resurrecting the King,
Yes.
You're talking about bringing somebody from the past to the present.
Right.
That qualifies it as science fiction.
Right, because I use scientific elements, I use robotics, I even threw in a little fantasy to resurrect this human dead person. He's not a zombie, he's alive and strong, and he has special abilities. And then I offer the reader this cautionary tale. Now that you've brought back this demon, what are you going to do with him? And what
Kill
will
him
he do?
again?
Well,
I guess you got to read the story.
you have to read the story.
And
yes,
we can
thank you.
find Resurrecting the King on Amazon.
Yes, that's correct.
So is Resurrecting the King self-published?
Yes, it is. I have been published by McGraw-Hill years ago. I've been published by smaller publishers. I've done a lot of freelancing, but I've discovered that even if you get a big writing contract from a big company, you still have to do the work. And the company gets most of the profits. So I'm proudly independently published. And I try to do the best work I can and get it in front of people and tell people that I did the work, I did the polishing, I had help. I used other people around me to give me advice, to tell me when Stafford, this sounds crazy, this doesn't make sense, or you got a spelling over there, a typo, you need to fix that. Those are the things you have to do as an independent publisher, independent writer. Be willing to take advice and then do the best you can and put it out there. I will always proudly be independently published.
Do you think you'll always be a science fiction writer?
I may dabble into fantasy and magic because I like magic. And magic is always a lot of fun because you don't have to explain anything. You just wave a magic wand and poof, there it is.
There's a lot of discussion, we'll say, in all of writing, whether it be science fiction, mystery, literary fiction, quality lane, about how you go about writing. Are you a pantster or do you outline?
I like wearing my pants and putting them on any way I want. Sometimes I write without pants.
Too much information.
Well,
No.
but no, I know what you're saying. I believe in letting my characters tell me what they want to do. I am just the vessel for their energies. I hold my fingers on the keyboard, close my eyes, and the characters tell me what to go. And then I run spell check to make sure that the words are spelled correctly.
And obviously you have an editor and all that.
You always have to have an editor of some sort. You have to have somebody read your material. And again, tell you where you're gone off the plantation, tell you where you just flew away and didn't know where you're going. And it's always good to have a second set of eyes. But I also tell new writers, don't be afraid to start it, write it. And don't be afraid to, because you got to give it to people too who are not your closest relatives.
Somebody who's got the stones to say, this stinks.
Right, exactly. And sometimes, you know,
I handle that at the writers group. Everybody else is, I like this, I love this.
it takes a special type of person to tell another writer, this doesn't make sense. And you have to do it. You do it well. I appreciate it.
Well, do you mentor any young writers?
Not now. I used to. Matter of fact, I was an adjunct professor at Howard University for a little while. I was actually doing internet training, but I did have a couple of people who were interested in writing. I'd say, well, we'll sit down and talk about it. And I gave them some ideas. And I'm with other groups that are trying to put together ways to promote and encourage. You know, people who read science fiction stuff are one of the most closeted readers around. They're afraid to come out and say that they liked Star Trek or they thought Jim Kirk was cooler than Picard. You know,
I love doing absolutely.
So I'm trying to encourage to step out of the closet, proudly let people know that yes, I too have a lightsaber.
That's a really interesting idea. You had mentioned that the 200th anniversary of Frankenstein with Mary Shelley is coming up. Is there that Frankenstein? It's in the canon now.
Yes.
It's okay to read in school.
Now it is, yes.
Is there any other science fiction that you would say is in the canon?
That it's okay to allow people
Yes,
to...
that it's on reading lists. It's on summer reading lists.
That's interesting because Ray Bradbury and the Martian Chronicles at one time was censored. It was a series of short stories because they didn't think they were appropriate for all readers. And
that happens a lot.
It happens a lot. And
Huckleberry Finn's still censored in many places because he uses the N-word.
And I thought it was very appropriate. I was not offended by that. And I thought it was. Mark Twain.
But it's Mark Twain.
You know, he was a good writer. And I think that's the problem we have to worry about in America and around the world. we need to encourage and allow our writers to write, and we should encourage our people, our readers, especially our kids, to read beyond the established.
Canon, right?
Right.
I
That's why
don't-
you said they need to branch out. And
I don't
read
think
something
we'll
else.
see Henry Miller in our high schools
Well.
anytime soon, though he is one of my favorites. So you write science fiction. We've established that. You've talked with young writers about it. What encouraged you for science fiction? What did you say, wow, I want to do this?
Several years ago, I stumbled upon a writer, George Schuyler, and the book he wrote was called Black Empire. And he was writing in the 20s and 30s, the same time that Buck Rogers and all those guys are out there.
Right, right.
I
Rocky
said-
Jones.
Exactly. So I knew about Buck Rogers, but I didn't know about this George Schuyler guy writing about, at that time he was writing about this doctor in Harlem. Dr. Belsidus, who's a fancy black doctor, and he's created this Black International that's plotting to overthrow the world. And they've invented some type of laser beams, and they've got these rockets that can travel. And I said, wow, this is interesting because it was beyond the standard stuff.
Here's my Zulu king.
Exactly. so I said, that really kind of motivated me. Then I looked around and said, there are other historically writers from all different cultures that are writing science fiction that we really need to expose our kids to. There's a lot of Asian science fiction. There's Islamic science fiction that's out there.
Where did you encounter George
Schuyler.
Because you had mentioned it earlier.
Yes.
In the newspaper syndicate.
Right. It was originally syndicated in a newspaper called the Pittsburgh Courier. And it's
Still publishing?
still publishing in the 20s and 30s. A couple years ago, Northeastern University Press collected all of his works and republished them. And that's when I stumbled upon it. And I said, wow, there were writers back then who were writing unusual and different types of science fiction and speculative fiction. I guess a lot of people look at science fiction, say it's Captain Kirk on the Enterprise.
Right, or Star Wars.
Yeah, and then they just shut down. But there's a lot more happening that we can enjoy and be a part of. And that's one of the reasons I go to a lot of the science fiction cons.
Do you dress up like Spock?
No, I don't have the ears.
I think there might be another problem,
Yeah,
but we won't talk about that.
But I do attend, and I do like to go to the sessions. But most important, I like to talk to other writers of science fiction from all different genres, all different cultures, and you really get to get a fuller view of the world happenings of what people are trying to do.
So those cons are worth going
They're
to.
very worth going to.
And they're not just groups of nerds dressing up in silly outfits.
Well, actually, if you went to one, you'd be mainstream. They say, look at that normal guy. When you go to these, you see the all ages, all colors, all genders. How many more we have, I'm not sure, but yes. And people tend to interact and want to just talk and discuss things.
And so you can find information about these at your
Sure.
website.
Sure, yes, you can, definitely.
So you can Google anything.
You can Google it your heart out.
Okay, good. We only have a few minutes left. I hope there's some young kids watching or young adults watching who might want to pursue, as they say, the writer's life.
Let me add to that. I hope that there are some younger people watching, but I also hope that there are some older people watching.
Oh, there are.
There are who all their lives were working at a government job, locking themselves away, and now they can let their real imagination soar. I see a lot of older people at the cons enjoying themselves. It's, just because you're retired or about to retire, now is the time to really, pull out the spandex.
Okay,
You know,
let's go.
squeeze
I'm
into
with
it.
you. I'm mainstream.
There we go. But
Okay, young, old.
all types, all types.
You're going to start tomorrow. What do you do?
What do? You, well, it's funny what I tell people to do. Go to your favorite drugstore, buy a pencil and a pad of paper, and start writing. Don't forget about the computers and the word processing. Put pen to page to paper and write what your thoughts are. What bugs you? What did you see that really ticked you off? What would you like to do? If you had to start all over again, what would you become? I'd become an astronomer because I love astronomy now. But I would say that put down what you would like to see, what you believe in, or what you would like to believe in. Start to write. Don't even think about what genre it is. It could become a sci-fi western romance with a horrific element in it. It doesn't matter. But you should be, one, sit down, you and the page, and put down your first set of words.
As so many people are now saying, I'm embarrassed because I can't remember her last name, writing down the bones, Natalie Goldberg. She said, it's funny because I teach writing at school, but she says, kill your editor. What's the best way to assassinate your editor in 50 words or less?
Give him an extremely good piece that he can't mark up.
Okay. I was actually talking about your internal editor.
Take a deep breath. As they say, write like no one is watching.
No one is usually.
Well, it's like when you're dancing. Somebody's usually, look at that guy dancing. Doesn't he know? You should...
Okay, I like that.
Yeah, but
watch or write like nobody's watching.
Right.
And this has been an example.
Let me add to that.
Okay, one real quick.
Okay, write like nobody is criticizing you. That way you can write and not worry about anyone being critical.
And I say write like you don't care what critics say.
Okay.
But anyway, it's been great to have
yes,
you
it
here,
has.
and I hope to have you again. And remember, everyone, if you want to see Stafford's website, it follows in the credits, and I'm sure there's an email included, and he'll be glad to hear from you. And so will I if you want to write to Norm at night. And so we're done. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Norm.